All right, everyone, welcome. Thank you for coming. We're really excited about this, and this is a lot more people and a lot bigger room than I've had for any of my previous ones, so I'm excited about this. It's nice to see people passionate about PowerCLI. We'll go ahead and jump in. I've got a couple small little demos. We're going to go through some what's news. We're also going to go through, well, I'm jumping ahead of myself. So this disclaimer here means things can change if I say something. Don't hold me to it, or hold Alan Renouf to it, for that matter. We'll try and stay as factual as we can with everything that we've got right now. We may talk a little bit about tech preview at the end for the PowerCLI stuff that we have in tech preview. A little bit about me. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Brian Graff. I'm the Technical Marketing Manager for PowerCLI as well as ESX Lifecycle. So everything that has to do with auto deploy, host profiles, update manager. And I also do a little bit with Robo and hybrid cloud. So they've kind of got me all over the place. But this is my passion. I love PowerCLI. It really enables us and you guys to do a lot of different things. I blog pretty frequently on the PowerCLI blog, as well as a little bit sometimes on the my personal blog, Vtagen. And if I am doing things that are not blessed by VMware as far as supportability goes, I'll usually post those up there. They're still pretty decent things. They can help you out, but if it's not supported, that's where I'll put that stuff. So if you guys want to find me on Twitter, I'm pretty good about getting back to people as well. So really quickly, the agenda. I want to give a background here. I'm gonna jump ahead to save some people some time, and we'll come back to the agenda. I guess I wasn't too clear on the title of my presentation. I had a couple of people ask me, and in the abstract it talks about PowerCLI, but the actual title of this was Day-to-Day Automation of VMware Products. I wasn't as clear, so right now this is a get-out-of-jail-free card for anyone that was expecting VRO or any number of the other automation tools, because there are many. You'll still learn a lot in here. I'm going to go from kind of the beginner to intermediate scale on these. Luke and Alan had a fantastic advanced PowerCLI session yesterday. So we're trying to cover the whole gamut. Just raise of hands really quickly. How many of you would consider yourself relatively new within the last year or two to PowerCLI? Where are we at? Fantastic. Fantastic. We had some great group discussions. We filled up about double the capacity as we were supposed to have. And so it helps me to understand what we need to be doing for you. All right, as you're newer, we get the questions all the time. Where do I go to learn more about PowerCLI? Or I'm starting off. What can I get? Are there courses? Are there books? What mediums do I have? Right? And so understanding that most people in here are newer to it, I can start formulating the blog posts and other collateral around your needs. With that, I'll jump back to the agenda really fast. We'll talk about the background, who PowerCLI is for. Then we'll get into some specific use cases of why people, including myself and customers, use PowerCLI. And then why you should use it. We'll go through some examples, and then we'll jump into a couple specific products and the ways that you can leverage PowerCLI to work with those VMware products. And I've chosen a few that we can go in different methods to configure and use. All right, so starting out, one of the great things about PowerCLI is it's based off of PowerShell. And most people that are sysadmins, at least in Windows environments, have used PowerShell for one reason or another, be it if you're Exchange admin, Active Directory, or you're just trying to do things at scale. PowerShell is very simple to pick up. It's very easy to read. If I were to throw up code for some of you that maybe have never seen PowerCLI in your life, you would actually be able to read it fairly easily and tell what's going on. PowerShell, they're very serious about what they do. They're very dedicated to the product or the tool, and so are we. So you can see up here, PowerCLI, we've been expanding slowly. So first off, PowerCLI in its inception was for managing your vCenter server. But then it became more. We saw more and more people using it, and they said, I would love to use it for product X or for technology Y. And even internally, we've had people pick it up for things such as, and that's a very weak laser, but for image builder, auto deploy. We've had it come out just recently for vSAN. We're growing that portfolio of products that you can customize and be an administrator for, so that you don't have to use more than one tool. right? If you can script it, if you can automate it, we want to be able to do that with PowerCLI. One thing a lot of people don't know is PowerCLI is backwards compatible. So if you want to run the latest PowerCLI, it's backwards compatible to 5.0 environments. So even if your environment's not up to vSphere 6, you can still use PowerCLI 6 and leverage the majority of those features. There's no license required. It's a free tool for you admins. And the way that we continue to improve the product is by talking with you guys. So we go around to some of the user group conferences around the US. We speak at these, and we like to get your feedback. We talk with customers all the time, and about half, I would say about half of the different features and things that we've implemented in the last few years in PowerCLI have been driven by you guys. So we are very open to feedback, knowing what your pain points are and how we can help you, and then we can put that in our log and determine if and when we can get those out. All right. So a lot of people use PowerCLI or PowerShell, either one, for many different reasons. Starting off, a lot of the time people are using it as basic administration. So get VM. I want to see the number of virtual machines in my environment. I want to see what ones are powered on. I want to see if how many snapshots are in my environment. There's powering on and off virtual machines. Just getting started. A lot of times in that category falls the brand new PowerCLI admin. And they're the people that are scared to death that they are going to screw something up at scale, right? Have you ever felt that way? I definitely did. I'm like, okay, I don't want to get into CLIs because I don't want to screw something up and have a resume generating event, okay? In that instance, a lot of people start out in that side of things using get commands, because get commands are read-only. You're not going to mess anything up in your environment. It's a great way to start. It's a great way to learn. The next is the advanced admin. Those are the people that are comfortable with PowerCLI. Maybe they've worked in other SDKs or CLIs before. They've worked with an API, and they can use the vSphere API, which is open and an advanced commandlet to users. If the commandlet doesn't exist in PowerCLI, you can actually reach into the vSphere API and be able to work directly with the API methods and get that functionality even if a commandlet doesn't exist. So you'll see people doing that. You'll see people creating their own functions. So I created some, you'll see later on, I created one for NSX. NSX uses a REST API, and instead of having to create the REST string all the time, I created a function that will wrap all the necessary information into the REST format that I need, and I can run my commands that way over and over. And so I turned it into a function that can be reused. And sometimes they'll do parallel jobs. So in general, PowerCLI is one thread. It does one thing and moves on, does one thing. You can actually leverage PowerCLI to do multiple jobs in parallel at the same time. Then you have others like developers and management, especially is into reporting. PowerCLI is fantastic for that. How many of you here have heard of vCheck? All right. For those of you that don't know what vCheck is, it was a script started out by Alan Renouf. And then he handed it over to the community, and people started building on that. And it's a script that you can set up to run, and it will go through and check. I think they're up to like 120 different things in your environment, and it'll make a nice little report. I'll show it to you here in a few minutes. And that can get emailed to you on whatever scheduled basis you want. But that's something that really helps the admins as well as management. Some PowerCLI use cases. So we've kind of hit on some of these, right? Custom reporting, it's great. We're going to walk through a couple different types of reports you can create. Large-scale changes. Obviously, you want to make sure that you know what you're doing before you do a large-scale change, because it could be really bad if you don't. But in general, it's a way to save you hours and hours of time. Diagnosing, exploring. There's a lot of in-depth searching you can do through your virtual environment via PowerCLI. And one of the biggest things about automation is being able to save a workflow or a script for repetitive, running it repetitively. If you've got a task that you're doing every day or every week and you don't want to keep doing that manually, obviously this is what you would use it for. So let's jump into to reporting. So one of the things that we like to do is for licensing, for auditing, for just our common knowledge. We want to see what's running. We want to see how much space is being taken up in our virtual environment, and especially if you have multiple vCenters, right? You don't want to be opening up multiple vCenter screens and having Flash running on multiple tabs. So this is a way that you can go in, pull out all that information, and this right here at the bottom is a little string that is saying, hey, get me all the virtual machines in my environment and show me their name, the number of CPUs, the amount of RAM, their power state, and which host they're on. And then give that to me in a CSV file on my desktop. So I talked about vcheck. Here's a little slide of what part of that can look like depending on what's returned. It's a fantastic tool. Go to virtue-al.com or .net, or just do a Google search for vcheck. It's a very great script, and it will bring back very quickly information that you need about your environment. This is what happens if you dump it out to a CSV, like I showed in the 2 slides ago. So you can take it into Excel, you can make graphs, pivot tables. It's really great for working with management and for yourself. You can then use CSV files into other scripts. So as you get more and more advanced into PowerCLI, you can create scripts that run a report or generates a report, and then you can pipe those results into another script to do more automation in your environment. This one here is called out-grid view. It's a fantastic tool that hardly anybody uses in PowerCLI. And what it does is you can run a script or run your command, and instead of piping it out to, say, Excel, a CSV, and having to double-click it and open it up, it pops open in this small window here, and it gives you the ability to filter and search very quickly from the top. All right? It's really great for if you're trying to tweak how you want your report to look. Right? And instead of having to keep creating files on your desktop and deleting them or versioning them, you can figure out exactly what string you want to use for your commands. And then once you've got that figured out, then you can go back, delete the out-grid view commandlet, and pipe that to what other format you'd like. So what types of things do we report on? It depends on your use case. It depends on what's required of you. But generally, a lot of times it's general details. Okay? We tie that in sometimes with virtual machine details. And as you use PowerCLI, when you return information, we show you, we kind of have this 80-20 type of a thing. We really try and figure out what 80% of the time you're going to want to see without having to see everything. So when you return certain things in PowerCLI, you'll see a certain amount of information, but that's not all the information that's being returned. You can dive deeper, and I'll show you how to do that here in a few minutes. You can see details on your hosts. A lot of times we'll be setting NTP and a few other settings later on as well. It's a great way to go through and set up your hosts and conform your hosts if you're not using something like host profiles. Okay. So a lot of the times we get used to going through and doing things manually, right? And I want you to imagine a graph in front of me. When you first learn how to do something, you're doing it manually, you kind of have these up and down waves, right? It may take you this long to do it one time. If you've done it a few times, maybe you can cut off some of that time, right? If it takes you a while and you don't come back to that for 6 months, you have to run that task again. Oop, maybe it took you a little bit longer, but you're kind of consistent at one level, right? With scripting, your first few times as you're trying it, it may take you this much time, right? And that's the biggest barrier for us getting into automation, because you say, I can do it so much faster if I just do it manually, right? Well, that might be true the first few times, but after 2 weeks or 2 years of doing it and you're at this level right here, you go, look at all the time I could have saved, because scripting, once you get your script to work, drops down, it takes very little time, and you're saving yourself all this time. So what's that barrier? How many times do you have to do something manually before you decide that that's enough, that you're ready to go in and create a script? One of the cool features about PowerCLI in our latest revision that we got out, the release 1 for PowerCLI 6.0, is we have the ability to connect to vCloud Air as well as your on-prem data center from the same console, from the same session. So not only can you manage what you have in your environment on-prem, but you can reach out to any of the virtual data centers that you have up in vCloud Air. So we'll go through some of the basics. Some of you, most of you will probably know this. There's a few little tips and tricks I want to show you here. Connecting to vCenter, you'll use a command that's called connect-vi server. You'll put the address of the server you're going to in your credentials. Okay? One of the cool features that a lot of people don't use that I recommend is what's called new-vi credential store item. And what that does is it allows you to store your credentials for a certain vCenter in the Microsoft Credential Store. Okay, it's encrypted. It's per user account on that machine. So if you set this up on one user account, you log out of Windows and you log in as someone else, they're not going to be able to see this. But it allows you to go in and say, I want to save, in this example, my vCenter was 10.144.99.9. I put in my username and password. And then you can see that down here at the bottom, I have my vCloud Air account and my vCenter account there. What that means is that later on, as I run connect-vi server, I don't have to put in my credentials. Okay, it doesn't ask you for it. It logs in faster. And especially if you are writing scripts, how many of you, at one point or another, have actually hard-coded your username and password into your scripts? Okay, we do it because we're kind of lazy like that, right? But as far as the security aspect goes, that's not good practice. So this is one of the ways that if you save this in the new VI credential store item, that you can actually run the scripts if you're running it from your user account without having to save those credentials in your script. All right, so the next easiest thing to get started on is get VM. And there's a lot of different ways that you can bring back your virtual machines. Get VM, like I said, brings back the name, power state, your CPUs, and your memory that's being used. There's a lot more that you can bring back. But what if I have 300 virtual machines and I don't want to see all of them at the same time, right? You can specify virtual machines by name. Well, I'm looking for a virtual machine that starts with management, and this is a wildcard. I want to find all virtual machines that have the name management in there. So you can use the asterisk, and it will bring up all the virtual machines with management at the beginning of their name. You can also get in and get counts. A lot of times I've had questions come in on Twitter, through emails, and they say, it's nice to see all those virtual machines come back from get VM, but what if I want to count the number of virtual machines, or what if I want to add up the amount of RAM, right? I have it all there, but I don't want to sit there with a calculator and go down that whole list, right? Well, there's different ways you can do that. For example, with the virtual machines, you can wrap your commandlet, and you have other options as far as math and other items. And so in this example, get vm.count brings back, I have 32 VMs in that virtual center. The next big one that a lot of people use, they want to see what's going on with their stores. They want to see sizes. They want to see free space. Get data store is a huge and one of the heaviest used commandlets. You can see I've got multiple data stores. This doesn't, at this point, differentiate between your local data stores and your shared storage. Okay? You can find that as you dive in deeper, but we're not touching on that at the moment. We're going to jump ahead really fast here and talk about some variables. So I said you can dig into some of these objects, but you can't do it when you just do a catch-all. Okay? If you do just get VM, you get what you get. But if you save that string with a variable, which is denoted by a $ in front of it, in this case, my variable is $DS for data store. It will save everything that is returned from that command into that variable. So I can go in and use that variable later on in my script. What I'm doing here is I'm saying I want to know all the virtual machines that are on data store green. So I can add that to my get VM commandlet as data store DS, and it brings it back. I can pipe that to start VM. So it'll take all the virtual machines that are on that and start them up. And this is great for home labs. This is great for test environments. If you've had to power down or you need to power back on, you can use this type of command to go and start all the virtual machines back up. If you want to know more about the different commands, because we do have almost 500, you can use get command, which will bring back all the commands for PowerShell and PowerCLI, or you can use get-vi command, and that will bring back just the commands that you can find in PowerCLI. I have a poster that I created for PowerCLI 5.8. I'm hoping to have it updated before Barcelona, and it's in PDF format. How many of you guys have seen the PowerCLI posters? Anyone here? Okay. Shake, nod of heads if it was helpful or just kind of cool, or you just wanted to put it up in your cubicle. We found it in, I was in Bulgaria and I went in to use the restroom, and there were PowerCLI posters along the walls. Like, they are so hardcore into PowerCLI. It was fantastic to see that on the other side of the world, they have PowerCLI posters all over the office. How do you learn more? Okay, we'll talk about different blogs that you can go to, different methods that you can learn more. But this is one of the best methods to learn how to use a command. I use this all the time on commands that I'm not familiar with. But if you use the get-help command, you put in the name of the command, it will bring back a lot of information. In this example, I use the -examples to only bring back examples, but every commandlet that we have has at least one example, if not more. So you can actually go in and see how it should be used, how it is used, and then you can use that and tweak that for your own scripts. Any questions so far? Are we doing okay? Awesome. All right, so that's great to see things from a reporting aspect, but how do we modify or do bulk actions? In this instance, I want to do a lot of changes to all of my ESX hosts in my vCenter. So what I did is I took the get-vm host command, which will return all the ESXi hosts in my vCenter, and I want to add the NTP server to these. Okay? If I'm not using host profiles, I've got to find another way to modify this, because I don't want to do it myself, and I don't think my boss wants to hire an intern to sit there and crunch the keyboard all day. So once I do that, at the top, you'll see I can go in and I add a firewall exception for NTP, and the bottom of the second paragraph, the set VM host firewall exception -enabled equals true. Are you guys following kind of the language here? You might not know all the commands up front, but you can at least understand what's going on. The third set of commands here is getting all the hosts and actually enabling NTP. So we've set the address, we've enabled the firewall rule, we start the host service, and then we turn the policy to automatic. Okay? So we'll just do a quick walkthrough of what I just talked about here. Maybe. Oh, that's the wrong one. Sorry about that, folks. Maybe we won't. All right, we'll move on. Okay. So this is one of the other big reasons why I first started using PowerCLI. I wanted to take a bunch of virtual machines that were on one port group, and I wanted to move them all to another port group. For whatever reason, maybe I was changing well, it wasn't changing the name. I had different port groups set up with different VLANs, okay, let's say. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to take all of my VMs and change the port group over. So what I did here is I first made variables of the name. So I'm taking my cluster named staging. I took the original port group of what it was, and I took the new port group that I wanted, and then I put that together down below. So I got the cluster, I got all the virtual machines from that cluster, and then I got their network adapters. And then I said, any network adapter where the network name is staging, all right, I want to set that now to the new name, which is VDSS staging 2, and I don't want you to confirm it, because otherwise you'll be hitting Y for every single one of them, right? So what that does essentially is all of a sudden I can migrate over as many virtual machines as I want with the click of, with using about 3 lines of code. All right, so a few other things that we do with PowerCLI is it allows us to diagnose. And actually, can I maybe have the people in the back, the slide deck went away for me up here on the, oh, never mind, I got it. How many of you have used ESXCLI from SSH or, okay, yeah, pretty much everybody. How many of you know that you can do ESXCLI from PowerCLI? Awesome. So you can actually do the commands here to walk through on each host without having to enable SSH, having to use PuTTY. Like, once again, we're going back to the whole using one tool as much as possible for all the different products, right? If you don't have to learn a new tool, if you don't have to open a new product or have another thing installed on your machine, even better. So as you can see down here at the bottom, we have ESXCLI. And you can go through the hierarchy like you would in ESXCLI. .system will take you into system, and you can go into settings and keep working your way down and then run commands as you would normally. All right, PowerCLI GUIs. What I thought PowerCLI was a command line interface, right? Why would we have GUIs? Well, there's a time and a place for everything, right? How many of you like GUIs? I know personally I do. It's kind of my comfortable spot. It's my safe haven. I'm very comfortable in PowerCLI, but there are times where I'm like, I really wish I had a GUI. I can do a lot more settings on the page. I've created a few different scripts that actually, I've created GUIs for them, and I'll show you them and why I use those here in just a second. Some of the reasons why we create GUIs is because maybe we're learning and we're comfortable with PowerCLI, but our coworkers aren't. Or we're not comfortable with our coworkers using PowerCLI, right? That's probably really what it is. So you can create GUIs with PowerCLI that makes it so that they can use PowerCLI, but only to the breadth and depth that you allow them to via that script. Also, if there's more sophisticated queries, for example, all-flash vSAN, I had someone internally come to me and say, I've got a 64-node cluster with vSAN. Each host has 10 disks, so that's 640 disks. I have to go into each host and tag which ones are going to be the like the storage disks, and that's going to take me a long time because I'm going to have to PuTTY in. I'm going to have to find the whole string, enable it. It's like, can you help me? I said yes, and I didn't want him in PowerCLI, so I made him a GUI. So this one right here is one that I used. This is a different one. TPS, we had some changes in previous versions of vSphere where TPS rules were changing. And we had some people come up and ask, hey, how can we get a report of if we are going to need to put more RAM in our machines if this setting is enabled or disabled? And I said, well, let me create a GUI for you. And what this did is it connected to vCenter. You can see those buttons on the top left. And then once it connected, it queried and it populated the hosts in that vCenter. It gave you checkboxes to select all the hosts that you want to, and then there was a select button down here that would then run that report. In this case, I only had 2 hosts for the screenshot, but we've used it in environments with over 100, and then they can export it to CSV. It was very helpful for the customer. They didn't have to know any scripting because we took care of that for them, right? So it's very versatile, and this was all PowerCLI. This next one I'll show you a little video clip of in just a minute. We were working on creating a toolkit that would deploy a lot of the products from VMware. It would customize them and push them out, and I would only have to push a few buttons at the beginning. Okay? So this goes along and shows you I've got a GUI here. I can set my network settings, my NTP, give all these a prefix for a name, and then hit go, and it'll go and it will deploy my OVAs. It will then put in the properties. It will then set up the networking, get them talkie-talkie one with another, and I'm out having lunch with my friend, right? And it does that all in about an hour and a half. This is the vSAN one I was talking about. It looked pretty similar to the first one, but it would bring up all the hosts, and then you could generate the query that would go and bring back all the disks in the lower half. All right, and I have buttons to enable and disable SSH and a few other things, but you kind of get the idea, right, of where I'm going with GUIs. It's not something I would recommend doing all the time, but if you're working with people that maybe aren't good into scripting or are worried about messing something up at scale, this really puts a boundary around what they're able to do. Okay, and with that, we'll try the other demo. All right. So I went ahead and I created a few different tabs, and I can choose the software directory of where all my OVAs are, put in my vCenter information, and choose what exactly I want to do with it. I validate against my vCenter. I can choose what I want to install, And if I want to use the trial or the product key, and I'm sorry, I don't trust you guys. I had to blank out my product keys because I know they're taking pictures, and next thing I know, I've got a bunch of people using my licenses. But I'm choosing my data stores. I'm giving it a prefix of a name. I validate to make sure that those names aren't in vCenter, and I hit deploy. And I have this cool little GUI, and you can see everything. This is sped up, of course. I wish my environment was that fast. But isn't that a cool feeling to see that you did that in a number of like 4 or 5 clicks? Okay. You can see it go through, and then as it's finishing up certain things, it's installing Windows over here in one of the virtual machines. I got all green checkboxes in, it finished. Okay. Alrighty. Moving on. How are we doing on time, guys? Are we doing good? All right, let's walk through a few of the different products. So, like I said, remember the picture at the beginning. We tie into about 10 to 20 different products with VMware to some form or another. We'll start with vCloud Air commandlets. I briefly mentioned this. I'm going to mention 2 different things. We're going a little bit more past the basic PowerCLI into some more of the intermediate level right here. There's what we call low-level commandlets and high-level commandlets. A couple of you I've talked with throughout the week already about this, but it's good to understand. You have high-level commandlets, which are what we provide you. New VM, get data store, move VM. All those commandlets that you would actually run in PowerCLI, those are high-level commandlets, and we make that easy for you. But what that's doing on the back end is it's just calling all the API, all the different APIs necessary to invoke that command. And so, for example, new VM, if you were to do that via the API, you'd have about 25 lines of code. Okay? And we turn that into one line with a few parameters for you. You specify the name, how many CPUs you want, how big of a virtual disk you want, and it goes and does all that for you. Low-level commandlets are essentially interacting with the API. So we've gone ahead and we've created commandlets for vCloud Air. Some of them are leveraging the vCloud Director commandlets. But as you can see here, we have specific commandlets to connect to vCloud Air. Connect-PI server. Disconnect. Get your data center. So certain products that we have these commandlets for you. And we'll just skip past these. I want to save some time here in the end for questions, so we'll skip past some of the stuff that's not as important. We did the same thing with vSAN commandlets. Okay, people are starting to get really active into purchasing and using and leveraging the power of vSAN. So we went ahead and we created these commandlets for people, and it allows them to automate creating the vSAN disk. Excuse me. Creating the disk group, setting it to either automatic or manual, essentially doing all the work that you would have to otherwise in the web client. So in this, those of you in the back may not be able to see, I went ahead and I took 3 hosts, get VM host, and I put the addresses here, and I said, get me the network adapter for those. I want to enable vSAN traffic. I said, find me the port group that's my management network, and set that network adapter to allow vSAN traffic enabled as true, and don't confirm with me. And I could see those go through. And I said, OK, great. Now I want to get my vSAN cluster, and I want to set the cluster to enable vSAN. I want it to claim the disks automatically, and I don't want you to confirm. And boom. All of a sudden, I can go into my disk groups, and I've got all 3 of them. It took 3 lines of code. Whereas if you were to do that manually, it may take you more time, right? So leveraging the power of the high-level commandlets is great. Now in tech preview, this was a very popular demand or request that we got. I like to say demand because some people were pretty much demanding it. But a lot of people wanted to be able to tie into vRealize operations. So in our tech preview, you'll see we have a few new commandlets that will allow you to get alerts, the definitions, recommendations, statistics. You can actually start interacting with your vRealize Operations Manager via PowerCLI. Now, how does this fit into your use cases, right? This could be through reporting. This could be through operations. I have a small sample of code here where I would connect to my Operations Manager server, right? I would get all the alerts, and then I would get the definitions for all those alerts. So if I have certain alerts that are coming up and I don't want to open up the console, I want to just stay in PowerCLI, or I have certain scripts that say, hey, if a certain alert comes up, send a message to my admin or to our boss, or generate a certain type of report. It gives you one more way to catch these issues before they become big problems. So these are a few products that have the high-level commandlets. Let's talk about some of the low-level. How many of you use Site Recovery Manager, just by show of hands? Okay, so a number of you. We had a lot of people asking for that. They said, hey, we want to have access into Site Recovery Manager. Well, one of the things that we do is if we want to test the waters, we'll give you guys the access, say, the way to connect in, and then we give you access to the low-level commandlets. Well, what does that look like? We say, maybe we're not investing 100% of our time into creating the commandlets yet. We don't know how much you'll be using them or which commandlets exactly you'll want. So let's open this up for you. So as you can see over here, this gets into the more advanced. This is way past the get VM stage, right? But you can run what's called get member. If you get an object, you can use the short form of it, which is GM. So you take an object and you pipe it, the vertical bar, to GM, and it will bring back all the different properties and methods of the API. Okay? So what we've done is we've opened up a way for you guys to see into SRM and for you to kind of take control and make your own advanced functions. And as you guys do that and we get feedback from you, because like I said, this is very much customer driven, we're able to take that information and potentially create commandlets for you. Okay? But as you can see here, these methods are the actions that you can take, and properties are the values that you can pull from there. NSX, hot topic. One of the things that we did, and I mentioned this at the beginning of the session, was NSX is based heavily around the RESTful API. So if any of you have used the RESTful API before, or you've never used it and you're trying to get into it, it may have a little bit of a learning curve. And the silly thing about it is most of the time the issue is in the header of how you have your username and password encoded to actually be able to connect in. So these slides also will be available after, so you guys can grab this information there. I love when you guys take pictures too. That's totally fine. But this was the beginning of what I had created. So I created a command called connect NSX manager. And I went in and I took all the information that I needed for a header in REST, and I put it down here below to create the REST header. And so it will pass along my credentials in here. It will package it up nicely, and I can use that for any time I want to talk with NSX. Okay? So just because we don't have commandlets for a specific product doesn't mean that you can't interact with that. On the contrary, it's so extensible, PowerShell and PowerCLI, that you guys can do this in a multitude of different ways. Another thing I've seen people do is create shell scripts, wrap them in PowerCLI, and push them across to virtual machines, Linux machines, and invoke those remotely, all using PowerCLI. So you can use it however you want. All right, so what's new in our tech preview? We already talked a little bit about Operations Manager, right? And we hope you guys can test it, give us feedback, let us know what you like, what you don't like, what's missing, so we can try and grow on that in the future. Some of the new features or commandlets in this tech preview deal around storage, being able to work with VASA, being able to work with NFS and VAO. We also have more commandlets for on-demand vCloud Air, which before it was just for subscription-based. Now you can use vCloud Air for on-demand. So if you get the credits here at VMworld, the $600 credits or whatever for vCloud Air, go ahead and try these out. We also have the ability to look at host hardware information in a much easier fashion. So I just highlighted a few things here. How many of you use Update Manager in your environments? Okay, awesome. How many of you knew that there were Update Manager commandlets? How many of you could actually find them? Okay. We have a few that you must have spent a lot of time. I knew they existed. I went and I looked for them. I couldn't find them, and I thought, where are they? Right? And if I didn't know that they existed, I wouldn't have even been able to search and dig deeper. We've gone ahead and we've added the Update Manager commandlets directly into the core PowerCLI. So in the tech preview, you'll see that. You no longer have to go out and download additional modules for that. And we're continually migrating everything over into modules. So if you aren't aware of how modules and snap-ins work, all of your previous scripts, at the very top it'll say add-ps snap-in vmware.vimautomation.core, and that would take, if you're running the script in PowerShell, it would grab all the necessary files from PowerCLI to run that in PowerShell. Okay? Microsoft has gone and said there's a better way to do this. We can use what are called PowerShell modules. They don't need to be installed. They can be dragged and dropped into a specific folder, which makes it easier for us to be more agile, right? I mean, potentially we could start delivering to you guys faster if you didn't have to go out and install every single time we had a new feature or command for you. So as we started with 6.0, we were able to convert about half of the snap-ins into modules. And in this tech preview, we've gotten the licensing in there, and we're down to 1 or 2 little stragglers. And once we get to that point, you won't need an actual installer for PowerCLI. You can drag and drop. For those that want to take a quick picture, here are the list of commandlets for the tech preview. I'll leave it up for about 10 seconds. For those of you who want to be fast. Perfect. All right. So what now? I've got a couple more people. Okay, there you go. What now? What do I do? We've kind of had an introductory, basic version of PowerCLI. I hope this has been. I hope that you guys have learned something from this, even if it's a small thing here or there, or things you can tweak in your own environment. Where do you go from here? Okay. We've had one awesome session at VMworld yesterday on PowerCLI. If you guys have had this, hopefully it's been at least partially awesome. And what do you do now? Well, you can go download PowerCLI 6.0. We have a little 7-question survey to hear from you what you guys want to see, what you guys don't want to see, what you're struggling with. You know, tell us how you want to learn. I think in there it says, how do you guys want to learn about this? Is it blog posts? Is it videos? You know, let us know so we can do that for you. I want to talk quickly about Power Actions and Onyx, which are 2 fantastic ways for you to learn PowerCLI. Onyx for the web client just came out a couple weeks ago. How many of you know what Onyx is? Awesome. For those of you that don't know what Onyx is, it's a VMware Fling that will allow you to record the actions that you are taking in vCenter, and it will spit it out in code for you that you can use in PowerCLI. So if you're trying to learn and you want to know how to do a certain command, but maybe we don't have a commandlet for you, and it's something maybe a little more advanced, and you can't figure out how to do it, you can open up Onyx. You can hit Start Recording. You do the actual command in the browser, and then you hit Stop, and it will spew out that code for you. And you can take that code, you can see what's going on, you can tweak it and turn it into your own commandlet or advanced function. Power Actions is another way that, besides GUIs, that you can keep other people from doing more than you really want them to do in PowerCLI. And Power Actions is another Fling that you can install on vCenter Server. What it'll do is it'll allow you to actually upload your scripts to a repository for vCenter Server. You can have a private repository and a public repository for other admins, right? And then you can actually right-click on objects in vCenter Server and execute scripts against those. So you don't have to go in and open up PowerCLI. You don't have to go do. You don't have to go in and open a session or even know what PowerCLI is. Really, if you write your scripts correctly, you can right-click on a VM or a cluster and whatever the object is, and actually execute your scripts off of that. So that's another fantastic thing. I referenced a poster. You can see it at that short link. It's a medium link, I guess. And we should have another one out, hopefully around Barcelona time, for you to really see what all the different commandlets are and how you'd use them. Another place you can learn more, Twitter at PowerCLI and at vbriangraph. I'd love for you guys to follow and ask questions and use the hashtag PowerCLI. I monitor that all the time. There's a lot of people that do. And a few other links of places where you can get more information from the communities. With that, I'll show one more thing and open it up for questions. So we like to show this. I don't know how many of you guys have seen this in the past. We get a lot of feedback around PowerCLI. So to summarize some of this, this guy said, PowerShell saved me so much time. Another person said, Luke, if you don't know who Luke Deakins is, he's a PowerCLI prodigy, and he helps everybody out. He says, thanks a million, you saved me a lot of time. You saved our bacon. You guys are kind of getting the idea of what's going on here, right? You saved me heaps of time. You saved me hours. You saved my coworkers a bunch of time in the next patch cycle, all the way down to the one I like the most is if I ever manage to find a girlfriend, I'll have tons of time to spend with her thanks to all the time PowerCLI has saved me. So I hope this guy has actually found a girl. Anyways, I'll put this on the thank you. We can end a little early for those of you that want to go, and for those that want to stay and ask questions, you guys have about 15 minutes for that. So everyone, thank you for coming. For those that want to stay, we do have mics in the middle, or if you want to be loud, I'll just repeat the question. Okay, he said he just missed the start of the repository. The repository is a VMware fling called Power Actions. Yeah, and when you install that, it allows you to have that repository. I use GitHub, so the question is, what do I use for script repositories? I like to use GitHub. For things I don't want to put up on GitHub quite yet, I just make a C temp folder or a C scripts folder because it's very easy for me in my scripts to push things there and to locate that. As far as how I edit and manage PowerCLI, that's another good question is, what kind of tools do you We're still talking. And then there's another one called PowerShell Studio, and that one is, I think, $200, but it's very good, and that's the one that I actually use to leverage to create the GUIs. It gives you kind of a Visual Basic or Visual Studio view of creating the GUIs, and it will put the PowerShell. Sapien, yep, there we go. Hey, thanks, guys, for turning that back on. It's $200 or $300, yeah. So if you want to get more into GUIs and look at that, that's another way you can do that. Sapien PowerShell Studio.
Back to the Power Actions. Where are those scripts executed?
They're executed off of a remote. So when you set up Power Actions, that's a very good question. You'll need a remote PowerShell box or virtual machine, and you just configure it, and it'll run that remotely on another machine. But that's fantastic because there's a lot of people that run Linux or Macs that don't have PowerShell or PowerCLI on their local machines, and they don't want to RDP a box to have to run PowerCLI code. So this is a way for them to do it from the vSphere web client. So. Any other questions? Yeah?
You mentioned that there were no commandlets for NSX. Are those coming? Or is it always going to be the recipes?
So the question was, are there going to be commandlets for NSX? I can't actually answer that for you, but I will say that we take all your recommendations and your asks and we put them in a backlog and we start to order them in the order of how many people we're hearing that from. So if that's something that people are interested in, letting us know, finding us on Twitter, direct messaging, emails, whatever, we can then start prioritizing that. And depending on the wants, you may see that in the future.
So when VMware creates the commandlets, PowerShell's supposed to be built in a way where administrators can create their own commandlets, right?
Yep.
So like if the community made, I don't know the right terms, like made those commandlets, what would be different than, from VMware doing as far as performance? Is there going to be a performance difference?
Yes. So good question. So he said PowerShell is a way, anyone can make commandlets, right? And we make commandlets from the PowerCLI team. And is there going to be any sort of performance difference between us making them and you guys making them? And the answer is it depends, right? In this whole room, if I had said, let's all try and script to do X action, we would probably come out with about 40 or 50, maybe more different ways of doing it, of getting to that same result. Some people's code would be longer, some people's code would be shorter, but the end result's going to be the same, right? For the most part. So it all comes down to how well you script that, right? So how efficient your code is. Our team's very good about scripting very efficiently, but it's definitely something where we would like to see people creating those. And on that note, we're creating a PowerCLI repository, an official PowerCLI repository. It's created. It's private right now as we're loading it up with scripts from from previous blog posts and from other things that we've seen. But we're hoping to open that up in the next month or so, to where you guys can go in, you can grab the codes that we've written, the scripts that we've written, and even contribute to those. Okay. Sorry, 1 second. Go ahead. Uh-huh.
They've got some good tips on, sizing your scripts right, and so you're not ballooning memory and more efficiency, just adding on to what you're talking about.
Yeah, definitely. He was just saying that PowerShell Deep Dive has information on how you can script better and more efficiently. Thank you. Do you have a question?
Yeah, so I was curious about the status of the code for SRM.
Mm-hmm.
For example, adding or removing a VM from a recovery plan.
Okay. So the question was, do we have things in the works maybe for being able to work with recovery plans in PowerCLI for SRM? If it's something that you can see from the API, you can do it. We don't have anything currently for that. Okay. Any other questions? Sure. Good question. So get VM guest. I'm going to fill you in on a little secret that I didn't talk about here because I didn't want to go too deep. But there's get VM and there's get view, which will both bring back information for you. Get VM will bring back a VI object. Okay, so we've got VI objects and we've got view objects. If I use get view, it'll bring back get view object, and that comes back much, much faster. The difference is if you use get view, you're going to get back a lot of code. Okay, that's just, it's not really organized, right? Where get VM takes a little bit longer because we're running actually multiple commands and multiple API calls behind, and then we're formatting that to come back as a nice little object, right? So in a lot of environments that are larger, if you run get VM, it may take you 2 or 3 minutes to get the whole list depending on how many thousands of VMs you've got. Whereas if you use get view, you can actually specify, I only want you to bring back the name and a few other properties, the properties that you want, and it will only go and search for those, and it will come back in a fraction of the time. Okay, so for those that are looking for performance, learning about get view, I've got 3 or 4 blog posts in a series that were about 3 months old now on how that works and how much of a performance difference you see in your environment. So definitely if you want to learn more about get view, it's more of an advanced view and how you use it, because taking a step back, if you run get VM, you can pipe it, you can vertical line pipe it and do some other action, start VM. If you're using get view, you can't use any of those commandlets afterwards because it's a different type of object. So you can then use either the API call, which is dot start machine parentheses or whatever, or there's a commandlet that you can run that changes it back from a view object to a VI object, and then you can start using those commandlets again. So definitely something to look into. I hope it piques some interest here because the performance increases are fantastic.
That actually reminds me, our infrastructure was having a problem one day, and I guess the web client wasn't working because the inventory service wouldn't start. And I noticed when I was using PowerCLI, when the inventory service was off, like it was like fast, like get VM. Why is that?
I'm not going to get into the architecture issues of vCenter. But I will say that we have seen that, we have noticed that, and we're very aware of the performance impacts and gains of either having or not having the inventory service. So we're working on obviously making vCenter better, more agile, and better performant. So can't say any more on that. Any other questions? Do you guys have any other things you want me to talk about? Yeah.
Do you have experience with different user interface based on web pages or
On web IDs? I have not. I'm sorry. Yes. I've got a good buddy of mine. His name is Google. He's fantastic. If that's been done, it hasn't been done frequently. So I personally haven't seen anything on that, but I'm sure there's stuff out there on there. Just Google that. Yeah. Do you have another question? Comment? Yes. So we have a new CLI that we're working on It came out in 6.0, but we've been kind of quiet about it because right now the only extensions that it has are with tags and content library. It's a CLI or an API that you can access from PowerCLI. But we're waiting for more and more products to adopt it. We're hoping that more and more products will essentially pick up this API so that anyone using PowerCLI can access any of these products, right? Tags are a part of that. There have been, what version of PowerCLI and stuff are you using right now? Okay. So in the tech preview, there aren't any additional changes for tags, but there will be some more blog posts and stuff around DCLI in a few months that will talk about ways that you can get into the tagging in a much faster and easier way. All right, one last question? All right.
Sometimes when I query, I'm connected to an object and I query the values of the property. I'll get the first floor, dot, dot, dot. Even if I stop to a variable, I'll get the first floor and dot, dot, dot.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get that entire?
There's two ways that I like to do it when I see that. I'll do a pipe, and I'll do FT, which is format table for short, and then I use a parameter that says auto size. It's dash auto size, and it will expand all that. And if it doesn't fit in the in that area, I will then pipe it out to like a text file.
Okay, but even when I put into a variable, I get that back. Four items and dot, dot, dot. I'm not getting one of those.
You mean just across like the columns?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So if you take that string and you push that out to a text file, but using the format table auto size, that should expand it all for you. It's kind of wonky. Some commands require, I don't know, there's one command that I'll run, and you'll get like 3 columns, and then the 4th column, the name is like vertical. It's like squished in there on the side. Not sure why that happens, but what I'm interested in seeing is with Windows 10, you can resize your console, your window. So I'm interested to see if that will play into effect with that. So, anyways, thank you guys for coming. Had a blast. Reach out to me on Twitter, email. I'd love to hear about your use cases and about your learning paths. So thank you.